to page 8, as well as on pages 10 and 52 of this day newspaper. How private universities forced JAMB to lower cutoff mark. That's the lead story. Also there on the front page, Buhari presides over FEC, Federal Executive Council meeting, and Oshibajo, Vice President, takes charge of ASU negotiations with the rider. That's one of the resolutions of the council meeting yesterday. Cabinet approves 5.8 billion naira for construction of Mambila power plant. That story is also in greater detail on page 8, jumping from, of course, from the front page. Southeast governors meet with Nwamboeze, that's Professor Ben Nwamboeze, constitutional lawyer, former Minister of Education, and Nnamdi Kanu, leader of IPOB. Details on page 46. Bayo.
Yes, my sympathy is with some of our leaders. Here are people who have declared threat to Nigeria, and they, as leaders who are supposed to be custodian of security of lives and property, are forced in circumstances beyond their control to talk to these chaps. You will recall that it started during the era of President Umar Musa Yar'Adua. People who had picked up arms against this nation, vandalization, they called themselves militants. They had to negotiate with them, call amnesty, and people were paid money for doing nothing. Now we have a situation, people have declared quit notices, but executive governors who are elected to defend the property and lives of Nigerians had to sit with them so as not to stop threat to peace and security. The third one is why we're having here now. IPOB, who is declaring separatism, is now forced by people who are elected to defend the indivisibility and indissolubility of Nigeria, to sit down and talk. Why? Just like the Attorney General of the Federation said, we need to sit with them and talk because of national interest and the threat to security.
You also have to add to that the rise of OPC, that's Odua People's Congress.
Thank you very much.
After the June 12 crisis of 1993.
Yes, so these are the developments that are very worrying. Youths are twisting government to have their way, and it is a very dangerous precedent that must be stemmed. The other one is the issue on the front page of this day, talking about how private universities force JAMB to lower cutoff mark. The indications from JAMB is that there was a meeting of all that has stake in admission. That means all universities with their registrars and people in charge of admissions. And that 120 cutoff mark was agreed. However, the 120 cutoff mark is not a basic qualification for admission. There are those who are going to take even as higher as 200 or more before they admit. JAMB also says that in the past, there are experiences that people with less cutoff mark than even the 100 and 200 or the 120 that we are talking about have been admitted, but they now have a strategy in place. After the admission process, they are going to have a list of all that were admitted. Later in the sessions in the years, they will also call for a list to ensure that what had been agreed, to ensure that those who were admitted were in compliance with the admission. But be that as it may, President Muhammad Buhari received a standing ovation yesterday as he presided over the Federal Cabinet meeting. It was the first since he went for medical vacation in May. There was a national anthem, and after that, there were prayers were said for him, for his well-being, and for the nation. Earlier, the president, who was elated and had watched the Nigeria female basketball team, was elated. He said he watched them on Nigerian Television Authority, and after that, he rewarded their efforts with each player 1 million naira each, and the officials 500,000. Soon after, the president departed for his homestead in Daura. He was received at the helipad in Daura through a mammoth crowd. The president took the risk of walking from the helipad to his home. In fact, the emir of Daura, Alhaji Umar Farouk, had to abandon his motorcade to welcome the president. Earlier, the president was received at the Katsina airport by Governor Aminu Masari and the emir of Katsina, Alhaji Abdul Mumini Kabir Usman. The president is expected to have a return of the native Salah tomorrow in Daura. Meanwhile, about 1,891,352 pilgrims have gathered this morning at Mount Arafat. Arafat is very central to the Hajj pilgrim, so much so that if a pilgrim did not stand at Arafat from dawn to dusk, he does not have Hajj. But the critical challenge is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 10th day of Dhul Hajj, which is the Eid al-Kabir day, and that is when the pilgrims are supposed to move from Muzdalifah to go to Jamra, where they cast pebbles as a symbol of rejecting Satan. In the past, all of them had moved simultaneously, and that's why there have been occasions for stampede. You can imagine 1.8 million people moving towards the same side. But this year, there has been development. The authorities in Saudi Arabia has timed and broken the group into groups. So each group has a time for which they will go and perform such rite. This is expected to eliminate any challenges of any the bitter experience of stampedes of the past.
I think they have stepped up their organizational capacity, you know, to be able to handle the mammoth crowd that annually, you know, converge on that holy land.
And among that crowd, there are 91,000 Nigerians. Unfortunately, we lost about 9 of them before this ritual. But the standing at Arafah is so critical that even those who are sick and bedridden will be conveyed on mobile beds to the site of Arafah, because if not, the essence of you are going to Hajj is vitiated.
Defeated, yes.
Yeah, I just read a story out of the Federal Executive Council,
yes.
The council meeting yesterday, the one on Mambila.
Yes.
Well, I've been hearing about Mambila, but this project has been on, been said, for about 45 years or so.
Since 1972.
72. Has there been a proper audit of what went on even during the last administration? Because there were some efforts, you know, to do something with regard to the Mambila platform. We hope it doesn't become another Jakarta project. Every time we keep hearing Mambila, Mambila, Mambila. So we just hope that something gets done this time around.
Yeah, the good thing is that at least it has not become an abandoned project all over the years. After 72 years, something critical is coming up. But this time around, you now have a Chinese consortium bringing money to the table, and Nigeria is only to contribute about 15% of that. That will go a long way. And the benefits are that there are going to be about 4 dams. There will be about 700 kilometers of transmission power line, and it has the potential for a tremendous agricultural area. You recall the other day we were talking about Jos and Gembu as a tourist attraction. It's going to boost those potentials. And so it has a lot of positive things for Nigeria.
You know, Nigeria has so many dams that have been either abandoned or, you know, operating at a very low, you know, capacity. And Mambila, the development of Mambila is a good development. Because, you know, if you have at least 2 or 3 like that, Nigeria would have a power issue would have been reduced to the barest minimum.
Zungeru is also there in Niger State.
Exactly.
Right? That work is supposed to be ongoing.
Yes.
All right, Daily Sun now, and most of the headline stories here have been read in other stories. Just besides the nameplate, EFCC recovers 409.2 billion, well, 9.5, well, put together is about 430 billion naira recovered so far. And of course, the EFCC says has secured 137 convictions. But we don't know whether the convictions are jailable convictions, are the people jailed, or is there, maybe Boy will help us out there. He said that they have secured 137 convictions.
Yes. There's challenge with the EFCC. Sometimes a few high-profile cases they lose tend to create an impression that there are no successes. There have been successes, and that's also what the chairman is.
Okay, now the main headline, "My Lord, I did it." That must be the words of Evans, the kidnap kingpin, who pleaded guilty in court yesterday. What the lawyer says that he was forced to plead guilty.
Chukwu Dumeme Onwamadike alias Evans, and 5 others, actually 5 others were arraigned in court. He and 2 others pleaded guilty. In fact, the judge was not too sure, so he had to put the plea to him again until he said that he pleaded guilty, 2 others. However, 3 others pleaded not guilty. After the case, his counsel had alleged that Evans was threatened by the police that if he didn't plead guilty, they would kill him. This has not been confirmed. That is from the point of view. You will recall that his counsel also had sued the police that they had illegally detained Evans since he was arrested in June. And the police said the counsel was actually acting in ignorance because they had permission of the court to detain him for investigation.
All right.
But sorry, let me finish with this. Evans started talking ever before he was arraigned. He's been talking from the outset, you know, from the day he was talking.
Whatever he said.
Well, exactly. So now, besides the photograph here, we have thousands of Nigerians missing. That's Amnesty International accuses military of killing 350 in December 2015. And that story is on page 11 of the Sun. And below that, we've told you about Oshibajo, leading negotiating team of the government government. And then don't arrest Colonel Omar once. We've read that too. And then there's one striking story here below the photograph. Benue flood, 90,000 now homeless.
All right, well, those are the stories that we can take from the papers this morning. The question, Bayo, that you were talking about, the lawyer to Evans, who was saying outside of the courtroom that, his client was forced or compelled to make that statement. He should argue his case in court, not in the media.
Yes.
All right, Bayo, thank you for being with us. See you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria still on the network service of the NTA. Let's take a short break now. When we return, we'll take our principal item for discussion.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You're here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Later.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
What manner of man wakes up in the morning, eats breakfast, gets dressed, and goes out with the sole purpose of duping his clients?
Where the dollar now? Make I check him now.
Now why?
Supposing if it is fake.
They are everywhere. The bad apples who spoil the rest. They can shortchange you. They also swap your good currency and give you counterfeits.
These people are criminal.
They are the bad money changers, mostly on the roadsides.
And they don't even get office address.
Honesty means nothing to them.
You know that happened like this. Where's my money?
Watch Prophet John Bull this week and see how this rot manifests, even as you laugh like never before.
Eh? Buddha, come and separate us now. You're not a serious-minded fighter. By now, the don't person I.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and to kickstart our conversation this morning on the position of the youths for leadership, let's take this report by Leah Kaltung Babatunde.
It is said that leaders are either born or made, but in both cases, leadership comes with responsibilities to fill into the expected roles. For this to happen, adequate preparation remains key. In the past, Nigeria boasted of leaders who mounted enviable positions in their prime, but presently, such breeds have become rare species. Some schools of thought have attributed this lapse to lack of mentorship from the older generation and learning institutions, and others a failure in latching onto available opportunities. Over time, societies have seen a rise in young leaders playing significant roles in the global space. New skills, innovation and entrepreneurship have been the drivers of change and evolution in positioning leaders. To prepare gifted and talented youth for leadership roles in a rapidly changing society is a large task that calls for comprehensive program development and curriculum planning in institutions. How have the older leaders who ascended in their youth been able to share their experiences with those who came behind them? What is the level of preparation in Nigeria for youth to take up leadership roles and positions? Are the learning institutions enablers for youthful leadership? How have the younger generation been able to position themselves for critical thinking in problem finding and problem solving? These and many more would form the thrust of our discussion this morning.
Thank you very much, Leah Katung Babatunde, for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the studios, as well as also from our Lagos Network Center. First, we'd like to welcome Dr. Robert Asogwa. Asogwa is team leader for Inclusive Growth Unit at the UNDP, that's United Nations Development Program. Dr. Asogwa, a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And we also have with us here in the Abuja headquarters studios, Bella Ann Undubuisi. She's director of Shape Up Mentoring with Abuja Global Shapers. Bella Ann, a pleasure that you're with us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And also in our Abuja studio here, we have Samson Itodo, who is the Executive Director, Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement, YAGA. You're welcome to the program, Samson.
Good morning.
All right, and from our Lagos studio, we are being joined by Bamboshe Martins, President, Strategy for Mentoring Initiative and Leadership Empowerment. You're also welcome to Good Morning Nigeria from Lagos.
Morning, Nigeria. Thank you for having me.
And lady, once again, you're welcome. Kinsley, maybe we'll kickstart by asking our guests to do an assessment of the level of participation of Nigerian youths in positions of authority in this country. You know, considering the fact that all political parties have youth wings. And of course, it is through political parties that one gets into political positions, for instance. Now, let me begin with Anne. Let me begin with you.
All right. No, let's keep on in the meantime. Let's actually go to Samson Itodo, who is Executive Director of Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. That's YAGA. Kyria, part of our conception this morning, if you recall, is we are, of course, extending leadership beyond the political sphere, because you have leadership in all areas of human endeavor. Perhaps, therefore, let's begin again for the benefit of some of our viewers back home to say, look, who is a leader? But leadership also presupposes followership. What is the interface between leadership and followership, and how does the youth fit into these metrics? Let's begin with Sam Itodo.
Well, thank you very much. I think the discussion around leadership is a topical one, particularly at this age when there is global consensus that leadership drives development. And to begin with the definition of who or what leadership is, I think leadership is service. Leadership is the ability to provide direction, or it's taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve a common purpose under conditions of uncertainty. And this uncertainty occurs in three different places: the head, the heart, and the hand. And so that's the simple definition of leadership. And how do young people actually fit into this? I look at this from two prisms, and I like the initial remarks that it's, when we talk about leadership, we should extend this beyond political leadership. But I like to start from the very first prism, which is self-leadership. That as individuals, we need to exert self-leadership, and that's taking responsibility for our own affairs, taking initiative to solve whatever problems that encounter us as a people, but also demonstrating those principles that underpin leadership, be it integrity, be it hard work, be it accountability. And then you look at public leadership, and young people also fit into this, because looking at our evolution from both pre-independence, during and post-independence, and even post-military dictatorship, we've seen young people in public space, not just advancing the cause of democracy, but fostering or promoting national development. So young people do have a critical role to play within our own political system or political space.
All right, let's go to Lagos now, where we have Bimpe Bambushe Martins. Madam, you've listened to one of our panelists here and how he conceptualized the leadership with respect to how that affects the youth. We would like you to come in here and make your own assessment of leadership and when it concerns, the youth.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to share a definition from John Quincy Adams that simply says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. In addressing a framework, an effective framework to youth leadership development, there's some critical things that I believe we must address. The first is, in my own work, I have observed that actually conventionally, the first interaction or exposure young people have to leadership is from the family. Unfortunately, the more I interact with young people, the more I realize that their family, their parents are not their role models. Secondly, with respect to leadership, the definition of leadership by a lot of young people is actually only those that are in electoral offices. And so these are some barriers that need to be addressed. I think it's it's important that we start by redefining what leadership is. It's important that we define leadership simply as what the CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, had said. Just you getting up and taking initiative. Leadership, she said, leadership belongs to those who who are just ready to take initiative, and which means anyone has the potential to lead, and no one is too young to lead and make a difference.
Bimpe Bambushe Martins, thank you very much there for your initial comments. Let's return to our Abuja studios. Well, of course, Bella and Ndobwisi, we skipped here the first round of questions, but again, we'll return to you now to have your own thoughts on the conceptualization of leadership. You listened to the first two guests. Samson provided his, and then Bimpe Bambushe Martins also giving an indication of where, how you get exposed to leadership, and then narrow definition, she says, of leadership, oftentimes by young persons who reduce this to the political sphere. What's your take?
So the two speakers have made a really important point, but I think it's important, like our Lagos speaker mentioned, to really define what we mean by leadership. So when we talk about leadership, what do we mean? Earlier this year at the World Economic Forum, the theme for the conversation was on responsible and responsive leadership. And I think that for Nigeria and for the continent, as we think about leadership, it's not just enough to say we should have good leadership. The question is, what kind of leadership is good leadership? What does that mean? So when a leadership is not attentive to the needs of its community, to the different sectors of the community, we're now our world is getting increasingly more polarized. We have ethnic diversity, we have cultural diversity. Our leadership has to be responsive to these new dimensions. Our leadership has to also be responsive to where the future is going. So what are the values that we want to create now to ensure that young people have the equal playing field to be able to actively participate in this 21st century? So it's not just enough to say leadership, but is our leadership responsive? Is our leadership responsible? That's what I would say.
All right, but let's go to the man from the UNDP, from the United Nations angle, if you like. How would you assess Nigeria with respect to leadership positions, the youth leadership positions? How would you look at it holistically with respect to the fact that, from all the comments made so far, it does seem that there is a yawning gap somewhere. That is something that should be done to ensure that youths are properly propelled to engage in leadership positions.
Yeah, thank you, Kiran. I think, like you said, there is a yawning gap. And I like the characterization started by Samson, that leadership we've seen in three perspectives, not just political leadership. It's political leadership, economic leadership, and social leadership. And I think that in all ramifications in Nigeria, not only in Nigeria but in Africa, you see that youth, there is an age-related discrimination with respect to the three kinds of leadership I've mentioned. the youths are often marginalized and discriminated against within the and I'll give an example. If you look at the economic leadership in Africa, you see that about 60% of African youths are unemployed. In Nigeria, you just have about 22.5% youth unemployment rate, And also given the fact that 60% of Nigerians are youths. So you see a very huge gap in economic leadership. Even in political leadership, it is the same. You really see youths who occupy positions of leadership. And if you go by our national division of youths, is between ages 15 to 35. And often when you hear that a political leader is a youth, maybe the guy is about 40 years. You really see people 15 to 35 occupying leadership positions. The same also goes for social leadership. So you see this kind of gap, like you mentioned, with respect to these three kinds of leadership. And the problem is, now the country and the continent as a whole, we're not taking advantage of the demographic bulge, youth bulge. And that is a challenge. In Africa, you have about 226 million youths, which is about 20% of the youth population, total youth population around the world, which is very huge. South Africa has the largest youth population, the same, like I said, in Nigeria. But we are not taking advantage of these demographic benefits, these demographic gifts. There are opportunities of this large population of youths, and there could be risks. But the problem, I think, is conceptual. Most of the time, when I read papers and I listen to comments, there is a narrow conceptual definition of what is youth definition and how youths, can be pushed to take positions. Because oftentimes we look at youths as beneficiaries, as target groups who have to benefit from one government program or the other. But that to me is very narrow. The narrative is changing across the world. Youths have to be seen not only as beneficiaries, but as leaders and initiators, and as collaborators and partners. And that's where I think the gap is. So for me, I think the gap is a conceptual gap. We need to change our narrative. We need to change our thinking about what is youth development. You have to see youths not only as beneficiaries, but as leaders and as partners. And that is the perspective the United Nations has been canvassing across the globe. At the United Nations, there have been efforts to ensure that countries begin to see youth development within the context of the three-lens approach. Youths as beneficiaries and target groups, youths as leaders and initiators, and youths as collaborators and partners. And I'm sure recently in 2015 there was a Security Council resolution on, I think the resolution 2025, that tried to see youths as agents of change, not as beneficiaries of government programs, but as agents of change. Youths should be able to drive the process of development, drive the sustainable development goals, drive peace and security in all countries. I think that's where the gap is. The gap for me is a conceptual gap. The inability of governments across Africa to understand that youths should be seen not as beneficiaries, but as leaders, as initiators, and as well as collaborators and partners. I think that's where the gap is.
All right. Thank you very much there, Dr. Robert Asogwa, for your comments as well. But just to indicate that what we are talking about essentially has to do with the Nigerian youth. Yes, it is useful to extrapolate to the African continent, but particularly for us on this program this morning, our focus is on the Nigerian youth, because by the time we begin to over-extrapolate, we probably will run into challenges of specific examples and whether indeed we are having, complementary, if you like, assessments also from elsewhere on the African continent. The Ghanaians are not bothering about what the Nigerian youth should do or how they should fit into all of this. Back again to Samson Etodo. On the basis of what we have seen, that Dr. Asogwa talks about the new conception of what youth development should be all about and how they should proceed. Now, from where are we at the moment in terms of our conceptualization of the youth in relation to development, whether self-development or national development? And in looking at that, let's see how we can now get a proper fit into the new conceptualization of youth development.
First, I think that whilst we're looking at Nigeria as our case study, we must also globalize this conversation because there's a global trend. and young people across different countries encountered similar challenges, be it unemployment, be it health, be it youth exclusion. But I think the state where we are, first, there is a challenge of classification. Although that has been addressed by our national youth policy that says young people are classified as 18 to 35. But from a policy perspective, the national youth policy is due for review and has been undergoing review. That process in itself is not inclusive. So the opportunity of getting young people to make inputs into the process is foreclosed. So you lose that opportunity to get young people's input into a policy that seeks to provide a framework for youth development. The second fundamental issue is when we talk about youth development, we must not approach youth development as from a very limited point of view, because youth is a heterogeneous group. Sometimes when policies are formulated, we just look at youth, but we forget that there are young women, there are unemployed youth, there are illiterate youth, there are youth in conflict, there are young people with disability. And this disaggregation is very, very critical if you must meet the specific needs and demands of these different categories. The third is youth issues are cross-cutting issues. And cross-cutting because they affect different aspects of our national life. But and building on what Doc said, the challenge for us is there is no deliberate investment in youth, in building the leadership capital in young people. And beyond the family unit is to look at our education system. How is our education system structured in a way that it builds young people's capacity to be problem solvers? How is our education system structured in a way that it makes young people innovative? Do we build leadership in young people within our institutions? So you go check, and there have been several efforts, no doubt, but look at as simple, let me start from secondary schools. As simple as elections, conducting elections into leadership positions in secondary schools. Those some private institutions have actually employed that. But you go and see what happens in our secondary school. Yes, you've got social studies that teaches young people about national patriotism and the evolution of our country, or teaches us history. But there is no subject matter that teaches young people leadership and how to demonstrate leadership in every aspect that they find themselves. If you go up the ladder, go to our tertiary institutions, the platforms that ought to build leadership capital in young people have been decimated. So you look at the national youth, the student union government, that, and you know, it's just structured the way our conventional democratic system is structured. You've got the executive, you've got the parliament, you've got the student union parliament. So go check first, check the question about the elections in those institutions and how they've been hijacked by political parties. And even the university authority does not give these students the opportunity to interface and engage and make inputs into policy. But what do you get? They are intimidated, they are marginalized, and I love the idea about it, it's a conceptual gap. We don't conceptualize leadership and investment in young people because we don't even see them as people who will take over from us. And brings us to the question about a succession plan. The politician and our political leaders and policymakers who ought to plan for the future and say, whether you like it or not, you must leave this political scene. It's natural. But are we asking ourselves, who would replace us? What kind of value system are we creating? What kind of capacity are we building in young people? So when it's time to emerge they would address the development challenge that encounter our country. And if you look across, just look at the challenge. We've got migration issues we're dealing with. We've got radicalization. We've got insurgency. We've got violence. The level of criminality is increasing. Now, if you look at one of the factors that drive this, is this lack of investment in young people. And let's look at political participation. And good a thing that the National Assembly is responding to this challenge by the passage of the Not Too Young to Run bill, hoping that the state houses of assembly would also do same by creating that space and fostering intergenerational dialogue, which brings to the fore the question of mentoring. How are we investing in the next generation?
All right, Samson, thank you very much. So let's bring it again, Bella Ann, into this leg of the conversation. Where we are at the moment, this transition to the, shall we say, modern conceptualization of youth development and therefore youth preparation for leadership. What's your take on this, where we are and how we can possibly make the transition without any rupture?
I want to highlight what young people are actually doing already now to prepare the generation after them for leadership. So as much as we talk about the fact that in Nigeria, we're not creating opportunities for young people to take on leadership roles, I think young people have seen this gap. And one of the things that they're actively doing is ensuring that this does not become a recurrent situation. And so as the director of the Global Shapers Shape Up Mentoring, that's what we're doing. With our Shape Up Mentoring program, we're now looking to the generation behind us, right? So we've created a mentoring platform where we're engaging high school students to understand better what their role is as leaders, to prepare them better for a career that will be more beneficial to them and also that will bring a lot more progress to this country. I'm looking at the role that different youth groups in this country are playing, members of the Yali Network, for instance. And I must reinforce the role that development partners are also playing in building the capacity of young people to be able to take on these different roles. So, yes, young people have been marginalized in Nigeria because, for the most part, we don't see them as, like my friend in UNDP said, as partners in the process. We see them as beneficiaries. What must happen now is that we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to make stronger investments in our educational system to ensure that we're preparing young people for opportunities that allow them to take greater role in becoming contributors to the Nigerian society. Be it in the political sector, in businesses. We're already seeing young people leading in businesses. Young people are driving the IT revolution in Nigeria. Earlier this year, we had Mark Zuckerberg come down to Nigeria to see what young people are doing in the tech industry. It's young people driving that initiative. So we must go back to the drawing board. We must create platforms and opportunities for young people to aspire for leadership. So what that means is, for instance, with the Not Too Young to Run campaign, eliminating barriers that even prevent young people from aspiring, right? So if they know early on that these are things that they can aspire towards, they start early on to prepare. Their families prepare them early. The educational system prepares them early. When we have students in children in secondary schools who are prefects, how are we preparing them to even ensure that they are being effective in their prefect role, for instance, right? Because when they succeed in that prefect role, then they move on to the next stage. And when they get to that next stage, how do we prepare them to make sure that they're also succeeding in that role? So young people are already creating those opportunities. And I think that if given the opportunity, they can scale up some of what they're doing. And I think there's real need for government to ensure that they're creating platforms for young people to be able to do more.
All right, thank you indeed. Going back to the drawing board, that's very pertinent here. And Samson Itodo also raised a number of issues, that youth affairs should be a cross-carpeting issue, that certainly cuts across certain ramifications of our, general life endeavor. And he also mentioned something like a leadership, building leadership capital. And based on this, I'm returning to Lagos to Bambushe Martins. Mr. Itodo also talked about national youth policy that he said, requires a rethink. And this boils down again to the issue of policy and policy implementation on the part of government, whom, of course, some of our guests have said have not really done well in terms of preparing the youth, from the outset. So, madam, where do you come in here now when we have known that the Nigerian youths are capable of being leaders if they are well nurtured and mentored? How would you address those issues raised by other panelists?
Thank you very much. I think beyond the government policies, there has to be a framework that works in this environment. Any framework that doesn't take into consideration the challenges, unique challenges the Nigerian youth faces is not going to work. So first and foremost, there's a massive issue with mindset. There's a massive issue with notions concerning what leadership is. I'll take an example. In your opening remarks, you said youth are the leaders of tomorrow. I totally disagree with that. That's part of the reasons why many of them have not taken responsibility and taken charge. They are leaders of today because the future actually starts now. They have potential, like my other colleague in the studio had mentioned, to take initiative at this time. So in any policy framework, there's going to be a lot of work on addressing the area of the mindset. Leadership, they need to understand, has nothing to do with position or title. It has to do with influence. Mahatma Gandhi had put that simply by saying that be the change you want to see in the world. So when we begin to work with young people, and that's what we do in our organization, to first of all lay that foundation in that framework, to lay that foundation to address that mindset, that they need to take responsibility. Another thing that I've observed with young people is that they tend to, whenever we're talking about government, for instance, they get very, very agitated and angry because they believe government, family, society has failed them. And so they don't have role models in the society. Now, taking their eyes off that was a lot of work, and it's a good foundation that we've had to set by telling them you have to take personal responsibility for how you turn out, and you must be the change you want to see. Once that's done, every other thing is very, very straightforward. Once the orientation is done and then you focus them on themselves, on taking responsibility, then we move on to the issue of self-discovery. It's best when young people begin to lead in their area of passion, in their area of interest, in their area of strengths. Once they've discovered what resonates with them and what they easily connect with, then they move to the next stage, which is the stage of self-development, when we're talking about the values, the principles, the skills, and the knowledge and information they need to be effective leaders at a very early age. I have found 14-year-olds that are making remarkable change and influence in their environment because they've been able to resonate with some course, and they've understood that leadership is not an exclusive club for a select few, but it's for as many as want to take an opportunity to lead. So once they've had self-discovery, once they've had self-development, continue to have self-development, then the issue of mentorship is extremely critical. A trend I have observed today is that what's most effective with a lot of young people I'm interacting with is peer mentoring. They are not looking up to a lot of adults because they feel that adults have failed them, government has failed them, society has failed them. Now they are being mentored by their peers. Those are their role models. They've redefined mentoring, and so we had no choice in a framework that's going to work but to adopt peer mentoring, to bring out young people that are influencing society and showcase them as role models. After mentoring, putting mentoring framework into place, another thing that's important is to emphasize the fact that they need to take action immediately. So you can start leading now, they're not leaders of tomorrow. And that has, of course, brought remarkable results because once they have been able to solve one problem or make a difference in a certain way, the staying power comes into play. Definitely, we don't rule out the issue of in any leadership framework or in any leadership framework, there has to be a lot of emphasis on character. Character gives longevity to your influence, and character is so critical. Those are part of the things that they are not seeing in those that they regard as positional leaders or leaders in electoral positions. So those are just a few outlines on how it will flow. But I see from my own experience that the most work we have to do is that orientation, to help them understand that they are not leaders of tomorrow, but they are today's leaders, and they have what it takes. Once they resonate with what they are, I mean, I'll give you a statement that my late mentor, Dr. Moro, used to say: birds never go to flight school. Flight is built into birds. Fish would never go for swimming classes because swimming is built into a fish. So we tell them to discover what exactly they are wired to do. And once they've launched out and discovered themselves, we've realized that they always surpass our imagination, and they become unstoppable. Thank you.
All right, Bingpe Bangboshe Martins, thank you very much for, again, the elaborate explanation that you have given, a number of points that you have raised. I wanted to stick with you, but I think I'll give the opportunity to the other guests to also respond to what you have said, because one of the critical issues that some persons, a number of persons, including us, Kirian, that we have observed with young persons, is their disposition, as you rightly said, that they believe that society has failed them, and therefore there's a tendency for them to reject mentoring by other persons, which you now refer to as reliance on peer mentorship, with the hazards that all of that represents. But let's return to Dr. Ogwa. That's Robert. Sorry, Dr. Robert Asogwa. Earlier, when you were speaking, you talked about the new conceptualization of youth development. Now, seeing youths as beneficiaries on the one hand, leaders and initiators, collaborators, and partners. Now, you've listened to the practical example, let's say the field experience of a mentor of young persons, telling us, hey, listen, these are the issues we find with young persons, and these are the steps that they probably would need to undergo, you know, to get into leadership in whatever sphere they find themselves. How do you relate to what Bingpe just said from our Lagos Network studios with regard to your typology of youth development?
You know, I think what Bingpe said is right. We need to have conscious efforts at youth development. And as you know, youth leadership is just a part of youth development, a part of the gamut of youth development. You need to have conscious efforts, you know, to do that. And she mentioned that critical things like youth leadership training, mindset change programs, and mentoring programs. I mean, these are conscious efforts that can be built into a holistic youth development policy. You know, but there has to be that conscious effort by government, by the society. They need to build the capacity of youths to take charge of tomorrow. You know, government can take lead initiative by having a robust youth development policy. And Samson mentioned that in Nigeria we have the National Youth Policy 2009, which looks now moribund, and now is undergoing review. Within the context of this the revision we are doing, it is very, very critical to incorporate these key elements, you know, looking at the three-lens approach I've mentioned, you know, and ensuring that we have programs, we have strategies for youth, for developing youth and leaders. Whether it's leadership training programs, which can be organized at the school level, at the society level, or even at the religious level. You know, mindset change programs, which is very critical. If you look at what the United Nations is doing in Northeast Nigeria, a critical component of our intervention in Northeast Nigeria is mindset change program. You know, it's part of our restoration, you know, for people who are victims and who are participants in the conflict in the Northeast. Mindset change is very, very important. We need to have a conscious effort at having mindset change programs, because a lot of the youths don't even believe there's hope for them.
That's right.
You know, and unless you have this mindset change programs across for all the youths, it's very critical. The mentorship is very critical. There is recently the Rwandan government organized an African Youth Connect program. You know, bringing youths to mentors. If you're able to link youths to mentors, it can help. But there must be a conscious effort at doing that. A strategic plan to do the mentoring program, the mindset program, and the leadership program. And all this can be part of the national youth policy. But as Samson mentioned, it is critical to have youth participate in designing that policy, because that's where the mistake starts. They're redesigning the policy. That's where the mistake starts. When we did the Sustainable Development Goals, which you know about, World Agenda 2030, there was a the mile survey. You know, they showed that youth participated in designing the Agenda 2030. So this agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, was designed with a very presence and input of youths across the world. It is this kind of initiative that we want. For the National Youth Policy, we want to see youths be part of the design process. They conceive it, they design it, they are part of the implementation and a part of the evaluation.
Dr. Asogwa, thank you very much. Still on this, Kyrian, with regard to the issues that we need to worry about, both yourself and Bingpe Lagos have touched on this, mindset change programs, mentorship and leadership, I mean, all of which are interrelated. Now, Bingpe Bangboche Martins is involved in mentorship. Bella Ann, you're also involved in mentorship. And to an extent, also, Sam Metodo, of course, depending on the way, we'll take a look at some of the aspects of what you do. How can we have, shall I say loosely, mass production of these strategies with regard to mindset change programs, mentorship, and leadership? Because what you're doing, shall we say, is in a small corner. Can we have mass production if we have 60% of our population as young persons? I mean, those are millions of persons. A number of them also suffer from some of the attitudes that tend to hinder their leadership disposition. How can we have mass production of these strategies?
I want to talk, earlier I mentioned development partners. I want to talk about a solid example of what the U.S. Embassy has been doing since 2014 to build the capacity of young African leaders. And I'll take Nigeria. As we speak, we have more than 100,000 young Nigerians all over the 36 states of the nation who are part of the YALI network. YALI is Young African Leaders Initiative. So in 2014, President Barack Obama launched an initiative to empower the next generation of young leaders. And through that program, he sent 500 young leaders to the United States. But then as people were applying to that initiative, they realized that there's a yearning, there's a large number of people who cannot be part of the 500. But through that initiative, they realized that the thirst for leadership was enormous. And as a result, they launched a wider network. So right now, you have 100,000 Nigerians all over the place whose sole goal is literally to just improve the state of the world. And they're doing that through multiple initiatives. One of the vibrant network we have here is the Abuja network, right? The YALI Abuja network has the WEEK program, through which they're empowering rural women through small startup funds, like 5,000 Naira, to be able to expand and, grow their businesses. I think a model like this is something that can easily be replicated. Of course, in Nigeria, we've outsourced our problems to international organizations, to development partners. We've outsourced the idea of building youth capacity, in this case, to the US government. So you have this government who's more vested in issue of youth capacity building than our Nigerian government. And so these 100,000 people can talk about how they've learned new ideas, they've learned new skills, they've expanded their knowledge because of tools and resources that the U.S. Department of State have provided to them. How can we scale this up? Of course, President Obama, when he initiated this, the idea was for the fellows to go back and come back and become part of building their country initiative. So they were supposed to come back here and work closely with the government to establish a replica of what it was they were doing. One of the fellows came back, Temitayo, and currently she's running a mini Mandela Washington Fellowship here in Nigeria, empowering hundreds of Nigerian youths. What I'm saying is, government can do more in the area of identifying these kinds of people and giving them the support that they need to be able to scale up their initiatives. These things are already happening. Young people are already leading these kinds of change all over the place. It's the responsibility of government to give them the support that they need to be able to scale up. If government does not have the capacity to do this, they need to partner with young people across board who are already doing it to be able to scale up the impact of what they're doing beyond the urban cities down to the rural areas.
All right, gentlemen and ladies, this conversation has gotten to a point where we begin to think of a deliberate plan on the part of government. We have all raised the issues, and just said it right. When Obama conceptualized what he did, actually I believe he had America in mind, irrespective of the fact that he wanted people from all over the world. Now in Nigeria, we've had a Ministry of Youth Development for over the years, and this ministry, I'm not sure, because when Mr. Todo was talking about capacity building with respect to raising the youth's standards, it does seem that the ministry has not done much to actually see how it can scale up what Anne has just suggested. So gentlemen, apart from the government, what other roles should parents, faith institutions, and of course schools play in this direction? Because as a matter of fact, the way it is now is that there is no deliberate plan put in place to put the youth maybe at par with their fellow youths across the globe.
Let me preface my intervention with an anecdote. Everything begins and ends with leadership. We, as much as parents and development partners and civil society organizations and media have a critical role to play, we can't run away from the role of the state. If you want sustainable intervention and you want sustainable impact, the state is a major stakeholder. And we must talk about the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. I think one of the greatest disservice that was done to youth development was merging sports and youth development. And it comes to the conceptual gap. Because when we talk about youth development, we think it's sport. Sometimes we just liken IT to youth. We forget that there are youth in agriculture, there's youth leadership. So if you look at, I'd say today, honestly, we just have a Ministry of Sports. We don't have a because somehow we can't see youth development anywhere. Let's begin with, let's talk about the budget, the youth development budget. Let's go to check the Ministry of Youth Development's budget and look at how many percent actually goes to building leadership. About 80%, that budget is actually the budget of the NYSC. Now look at it. How many young people are actually participate in the NYSC program? A recent statistics that I just released showed that there are only about 3.8 million young people have gone through the NYSC program. I think from inception, for 43 years. Now just 3.8. Now 3.8, when you have over 60 million young people. So what percent of that? But you have a ministry that 80% of its budget is dedicated to NYSC. Now let's even look at the NYSC program. And I know there have been efforts by NYSC to integrate leadership development program, but to what extent? What's the quality of that? What's also the follow-up? Yes, the community development, the CD, community development groups and programs, yeah, to an extent, but what's the monitoring and evaluation mechanism deeply ingrained in that? If you look at the budget, the Ministry of Youth budget, if you have 80% of the budget already going to NYSC and the other 15% going on recurrent expenditure and overheads, you just have less than 2% that goes to the Center for Citizenship and Leadership Training, Sherry Hills, and go and check even the curriculum and the program. So you discover that even from an economic point of view, or from a budget point of view, we are not prioritizing building leadership amongst young people. So that investment, and government needs to really rethink as we move towards 2018 in its budget, what amount of money are we earmarking to promote leadership development? When you come down to the National Orientation Agency, and that's why I love NTA so much, because over the last couple of weeks you've been advancing youth issues, and which shows that you understand the critical role you play in setting the agenda. But look at NOA. What are the other agencies doing in promoting these values and getting young people deeply involved and changing this mindset? I don't think that the mindset change or behavioral change is mainly on the part of young people, but I think the state itself needs to change its mind and its approach. On President Buhari's cabinet today, do you have a youth voice there? No. you don't have a youth voice, because the youngest person in the federal cabinet today is about 53, 54. So how do you, so when these people talk, and these leaders actually talk, because they don't understand youth issues, it makes it difficult for them to plan for the future, for them to plan for young people.
They're also parents. There are parents who have young children.
When you talk about if they are parents, and they understand the challenges of youth, then we shouldn't have 80% of our budget being earmarked for the NYSC. We should be investing and collaborating. Go, ask Bella. A lot of young people who go through this program feel more attached to the U.S. government than their government, because there's an absolute disconnect. And that's something we must address.
That's right. Thank you very much, Samson. Let's bring in again Dr. Robert Asogwa. Dr. Robert Asogwa, the issue that Kirian raised, and they've also commented on, what kind of government support are we looking at? Budgetary issues have been raised, particularly at the national level, but we also have subnational governments. From your perspective, what kind of government support can we look at in terms of, again, focusing on mindset change programs, mentorship and leadership programs, so that we have a proper conceptualization, three-step approach, if you like, beneficiaries, leaders, initiators, collaborators, and partners?
Thank you. Let me start by saying that it's not only the government that should play a role. The family, the religious groups, government, civil society, international development partners, and not like have a role to play, if we have to advance youth development, especially youth leadership. But the government should be the umpire as far as this country is concerned. And like he mentioned, if you look at the Ministry of Youth and Sports, which supposedly is the government institution that should advance these things we're talking about, there is some deficiency, there's some gap. I think he may have assessed that. And I think we need to rejig that institution. We need to rejig the institution, what they are doing, their focus, so that it should be able to address, because if most of the time if I look at, and I work with the Ministry of Youth a lot, but most of the time their focus is on entrepreneurship, empowerment, which to me is narrow. And that is the conceptual.
That's the beneficiary leg.
Exactly. That's exactly. They keep thinking about how to empower you, how to give them, benefit from entrepreneurship. So we need to rejig the mindset of the institutions again. The institutions of government that handle issues of youth.
The planners.
The planners. The Ministry of Youth in our case. We need to have a dedicated Ministry of Youth that thinks of youth issues in a holistic manner. And they have consciously to have programs, national programs, linking up with international agencies, the USA, the United Nations, the World Bank, and all the rest, the civil society, to have specific programs, leadership programs, mentorship programs, mindset change programs. So I think the government institution is very key. Besides increasing the budget, the institution needs to have a rejig of mindset about the focus on development.
That was why I raised the issue, of the contribution of the ministry, the government, in this respect, and because if they don't drive it, the possibility of making it happen will be very slim. And we are very good at planning properly, but when it comes to implementation, there's always a hitch. Right now, Nigerians are beginning to react to our conversation this morning by way of tweets, and let's begin by telling you that Mahmoud Haman is saying that good and stable educational system and serious youth not distracted by corrupt and he said the ostentatious lifestyle of the elite are the practical answer.
We have this one from Shan. There's a song. It says there is a global paradigm shift in favor of the young to rule, yet our elders with sit-tight syndrome are scared of passing the mantle. Why?
Now, from Lawrence O. Obisakin, societal values is in consistent collapse in Nigeria, and is directly linked with educational decadence and mental moral depravity level. All spell disaster for the youth. Leadership reflects its societal values. God help Nigeria of today.
Lawal Olaya tweets, now leadership starts from a good upbringing from the home and quality education for our youth in order to prepare them for leadership role.
Now, Ruben Chimezie, if the youths are being given the chance to serve under the old ones, then I think they will learn very fast to take their positions.
Now, Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet. Many youth have skills. Now, those currently in leadership positions in Nigeria should create the space for our youth to step into leadership roles.
Now, Mahmoud Hassan, or Haman, our secondary school leavers, well, Chibok gets in brackets, rated in USA as primary 3 pupils. How can they cope with higher education?
Now, Dolly Jack Solomon, it's regrettable that Nigerian youths who are responsible for the foundation of our nationhood are now used as election consultants and etc.
Now, Donatus Abo, he says, I oppose too young to run campaign. Politics, ideally, should be for experienced persons. Youth should be provided jobs and not he says, is it public looting or poly-looting? Okay, thank you very much there. But that's much you can take for now from Nigerians who are contributing to our conversation this morning. And at this point, we'd like to thank one of our guests here with me, Dr. Robert Asogwa, team leader for inclusive growth. He's also of the UNDP. We want to thank you, Dr. Asogwa, for being part of our program this morning. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Kirian.
All right. You are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll now take a short break, but when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria. One nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Welcome to the new world of superb taste, now here in Nigeria. Everyone, try it and enjoy the delicious goodness. We are bringing our new noodles to every corner of the country. That's right, it tastes great. It tastes fantastic. It's time for a new noodle. Nigeria, you want the truly delicious taste? Come and get it! Be supreme, Nigeria.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. As you can see from the caption on our screen, we are discussing positioning the youth for leadership. We still have our guests at the Lagos Network Studios. We just signed up Dr. Asogwa a moment ago, and then the other two guests are still with us and will be joined presently by another guest. But we have reactions already from viewers. This is the second set of tweets, so let us take those tweets right away, and then we bring in the latest guest. Ibeneme Dominic tweets, "We are far from it. Now, to engage IT students and accept core members is a problem with many organizations. Our system is faulty."
Now, we have from Donatus Arbo, who is sounding like a consultant. He says, I have master plan to provide meaningful jobs for almost all the youths in the country. Government should contact me on donable@yahoo.com.
All right, so that's a magic one. Oh, a silver, it has a silver bullet. All right, Prosperity Wonders, that's the Twitter handle for this tweet. Says the Nigerian system has not given the young ones a platform for leadership position, but it's a fight that that's to say the young persons, must win.
Now, Dr. Gidado Liko L, it says leadership crisis emanates when ideal mentorship ceases to exist. It is critical to give someone freedom without any direction.
Dayo Isaac Ojediro tweets, standard education, economic empowerment, and good mentorship by our leaders will go a long way in preparing the youth for leadership.
Now, Sani Michael Amokoji says our youth should be taught leadership skills and the danger of corruption as it affects humanity and the nation at large.
We have another one from Dr. Gidado Liko. It says, leadership is not for everybody. Some are born to be leaders while others are trained. What is more important now is training good followership.
Billy Jackson Solomon, Nigerian youths have what it takes to take Nigeria to the promised land, but greed, acts of betrayal, self-centered ambition, lack of self is the problem.
Well, that's right. That's a lack of self-esteem. Just continue with that on the next page, Kirian, because I think that's also break there. It says lack of self-esteem, lack of capacity and innovation have weakened their ability to collaborate effectively as a united front that can advance and negotiate the well-being of
I think that's his second tweet, and he has another one. We are taught from school that leadership is about service, but what we have seen in Nigeria is corruption and looting.
All right, Tashian, there's a song again. It says the generational change towards youth leadership must be embraced beyond mere talk show to deliberate policy on holistic engagement. Now, those are the set of tweets that we are taking at this time. As we indicated, we're having another guest join us, and that's Ambassador John Iwara. He's Director of Training and Development, the Director of Training and Development, Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. He's of the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports. Ambassador Iwara, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Yeah, well, of course, before we brought you into the conversation, before we brought you into the conversation, the guests have been talking about the role of government, of course, against the background of the number of points and issues that they have articulated. They say youth policy is undergoing some rejig, but there's something about the mindset, the conception of youth leadership, what the youth should do. What exactly do we have from the ministry in terms of what is being conceptualized now as a youth policy? What are the key ingredients in this new conceptualization, and how does it fit into what they have said, or how does it diverge?
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity given to my department. I'm representing my Director General. I've listened carefully the discussion, particularly from our sister in Lagos. Really got to the point that leadership begins at home. It's very, very important. It's key. And all about training. And that is where the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center comes in. We are involved in value reorientation and renewed mindset training and character development. And that is where we come in the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. And leadership cannot be complete without training. We should move from talk to do. Ours is a practical leadership training where the youths are all brought together and then given responsibilities to perform. For instance, we should start from the grassroots. In one of our training schools in Ogu, Enugu State, about 300 youths from the secondary schools just left there, a 10-day program, all on value orientation and character development. And the unity schools don't take this as a joke. they have made it a compulsory program for all their would-be prefects to come for training. So we must start from the grassroots.
What are the ingredients of the value reorientation?
Character development, courage, responsibility, tenacity to face challenges, using the environment around you, the challenges around you, to develop yourself and rediscover yourself. And that is why our training schools are all located in serene environment, in the water, in the hills, using those challenges. Because there's a different thing being educated in the head, and the other thing, getting outside the classroom and doing the real work, facing the world. So we are to teach you how you face the world when you leave the classroom.
Now, you have just printed a scenario, which clearly indicates that there's a program going on, from your ministry with respect to retraining and training the youth, to acquire leadership knowledge that they could use to face challenges in the future. Now, what is the level of the commitment? What I'm talking about here is how widespread, is this training programs that you have to accommodate up to 60 million, youths that we're talking about. I'm telling you, what you have captured now are the younger ones who are still in maybe secondary school or thereabout, but we have a lot more youths who are, have gone beyond that. Some are graduates, some are still in high institutions of learning. So how are you capturing, that mass, of the youth?
Okay, let me give you an example. We trained 2 years ago the militants. We rehabilitated them on value orientation and renewed mindset from River State, about 3,000. And the Yankari political talks in Gombe State, about 3,000 were all trained in Cherry Hills, and that's why we have that camp in Gombe now, and that's what we are involved in. Of recent, we have written to Nigerian University Commission through them to train that you should not occupy, no student union leader should occupy that position without passing through the leadership training. We sent that proposal 2 years ago. We have not received any response.
Have you sent a reminder?
Yeah, we have sent a reminder. I personally dropped.
When was the reminder sent?
Last year.
Okay, all right. But just one point, just before we go back to Lagos, a number of issues were raised with regard to the disposition, the attitude of young persons. Those who have participated in your program, what kind of disposition did they come with before you now started engaging them in this mindset change program, in the leadership program? What did you decode from their behavior, from the
mannerism,
yes, or their thinking? I mean, quite clearly, Bingpe Bangboshe Martins indicated one of the things, one of the attributes that she could deduce from persons some persons who have undergone her mentorship program, that so they believe that society has failed them, and therefore do not rely on the elderly for mentorship. Instead, they prefer peer mentorship. So what do you find amongst those who come to your program?
Yeah, they still come in with that belief. But when I say the change begins with you, and that is why from ab initio, they are given positions of responsibility. You are subdivided into a group of 30, 50 to manage that group. And each day, leadership is changed. And see, they come with this, oh, look, I'm the boss. But we said, no, this is not the situation here. Leadership is not being bossy. Leadership is being a servant to serve others, to lead others. So that is from that angle, we change their mentality. We start that mindset changing. Yeah, the society have failed you. Agreed. But the change will start from you.
Okay, thank you. We shall return to you in the course of the conversation. But as Cecily rightly said, we are returning to Lagos again to Bangboshe Martins. Madam, you have listened to John Steve Iwara. He has explained what his department has been doing in the past to engage in youth mentorship preparatory for leadership. Now, what's your take on what he has said?
Very much. Clearly from our discussions this morning, we've all been able to ascertain that it's going to take a multidimensional approach to address the youth leadership development. All hands must be on deck, both religious bodies. We need a lot of assistance from the civil societies, the non-profits, and government. And I must commend the Lagos State government because about 5 years ago, through the Lagos State AIDS Control Agency, they approached our organization for an intervention and mentorship program. And the very dynamic Commissioner for Education at that time gave approval for us to run a Young Leaders Club, which we call the Change Champions programs in public secondary schools in Lagos State. Now, when we're talking about the multiplier effect and how can we ensure that more young people, because the sheer scope of work is enormous. It's enormous because they make up age 40 and below about 60% of the population. One of the things that we had adopted in those schools was, when we started the Change Champions program, is to introduce a culture of mentorship. So every young person that was on our program for training, it was mandatory, it was compulsory that you mentor at least 4 of your peers. That culture doesn't even exist in adults in Nigeria, and that's why there's no succession planning. That's why a lot of pitfalls need to be addressed. So from an early age, especially those that we've been able to work with, they've been able to understand that true leadership and greatness lies in the number of people that you are able to influence. And it has nothing to do with, like the guest that spoke before me had said, it has nothing to do with being bossy. It's servant, selfless service. And that takes me to the not too young to run bill. My major concern with that bill is the fact that it's not even the bill, I think it's with the youth, is the fact that there are so many avenues where they can serve selflessly, and I don't want them to restrict themselves to political positions or electoral offices because, hey, in the executive, they only have 8 years to serve. So that's part of the mindset and orientation that also we are also trying to let them understand, that you don't need a title to serve. You don't need a position to serve. Service is selfless service. It's just about you taking charge, taking initiative, and making a difference in the society.
Well, stay with you, Bangboshe Martins, in Lagos. There's one aspect that I would like you to share with us from your interaction with the young persons who are on your program. Do they see the challenges in our environment as opportunities for them to make a difference? Or, as we have seen, do the challenges in the environment present them with a rationalization for escape, either crossing the desert or getting across the sea, or doing all kinds of things, or expressing disbelief and hopelessness? Whatever you have seen, how is it possible to have this, again, mindset change from saying, hey, listen, whatever challenges you have, whether it is power supply, whether it is crime or underdevelopment or otherwise, that inherent here, there are opportunities that you could use to make a change, a huge change, rather than seeking some Eldorado elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Before I speak to that point, I also need to emphasize something that I think Bella had said that has to do with who is appreciating our unsung heroes. We have a lot of young people making a lot of difference. 14-year-old, I'll give you a typical example, which is what you're talking about in terms of seeing challenges as opportunities. This young lady was on our program. Her name is Bukola. And after the reorientation and understanding that she has what it takes to make a difference, she went back to her school, because what we've told them is that just look around your sphere of influence and take initiative when things and challenges do exist. She noticed that there had been, the dump site in her school she said, since last year, Loma hadn't come to her school to clear the dump site. So after the program, she was gingered up and fired up, thinking that, yes, I can go out there and change my world. And she was told that the government authority in charge of clearing refuse is Loma. That refuse dump site had become a menace, a health hazard to them in the school. This 14-year-old girl goes all the way on her own. She attempted to speak to a few of her classmates to accompany her. She went all the way to Loma office. She went with pictures like we had taught them how to lead change. You'd have to dialogue. It's not fighting, it's not aggression. She went to Loma with pictures of the dump site and single-handedly got Loma, after she persisted at a 14-year-old on her own, to ensure that they came to her school and they cleared the dump site. Something that her principal and vice principal, they contacted us to commend us on whatever the transformation that had been going, that the program had caused, that would lead a young person to do that. So where am I going? It's still part of that reorientation process. Once they understand it, she's not from an affluent family. I'm talking about public secondary schools. When they understand what it takes to lead, they begin to see those opportunities. And of course, that was the emergence of Bukola as a leader. The fact that she solved the problem in her school and she became one of my own unsung heroes.
Thank you. There's no doubt the fact that many Nigerian youths are making waves in different aspects of life because we've had stories of very young people flying in colors in different aspects of human endeavor. And let's return to our studio here in Abuja, and I'd like to direct my next question to Mr. Itodo. You raised the issue of the youth not being involved directly in governance, because we have to bring in the political dimension to this conversation. You also noted that the youth should be part of designing a concept, that will help in mentoring or nurturing them. Now, at what level would you think that the youth should come into positions of authority politically, to be able to now take decisions in policy making and policy implementation?
I think there are three levels. First, there's a conceptualization of formulation stage. There is the design, there is also implementation, and then follow-up or monitoring and evaluation. And I think in all these stages, young people have to be visibly involved. And when we talk about participation, we're not talking about window dressing to say, yes, we've got young people in the room, we have consulted with young people. I think when we talk about participation, is qualitative participation, which still vests the influence power in young people's ability to influence decision. And participation makes no sense if young people cannot influence policy or they cannot influence any decision. I think that needs to be clear. The second is the political parties have a critical role to play. As we speak, our political parties don't have youth wings. Now, youth wings of political parties need to create youth wings.
But we have youth wings in the past.
No, in the past.
Presently?
No, presently we don't have youth wings because there's a so-called decree by the IBB administration that banned youth wings as well as women wings of political parties. But our political parties need to design a leadership development program, because a youth wing of a party builds leadership capacity in young people, and it gives them an opportunity to also contribute to development. And I think that's the fantastic thing about Not Too Young to Run. That intergenerational dialogue that it seeks to promote, bringing young people closer to our leaders to tap from their wisdom and experience, because you need the wisdom and experience of our elderly people as we forge a new path for our country.
Samson, thank you very much. Bella and Ndobose, I would like you to respond to what Ambassador Stevie Wara said with regard, John Stevie Wara said, with regard to the various leadership programs that they are running. Of course, there's the location in Plateau State. What are your thoughts on this? Do you find sufficient engagement between the institution and the NGOs that have various mentorship programs? What would you like to see?
I think it's important what CNLTC is doing, like you stated. But I think it's also important to amplify what you're doing, because before now, I'd only heard about this program in paper. Many years ago. I knew it existed because on the NYC website it lists some of these things. There is need for collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration with civil society organizations that are doing this stuff as well. But as you were speaking, Mr. Wara, one of the things that crossed my mind is, as we think about all these great, fancy, nice ideas of, initiatives to help develop young people, I also think about the segment of young people that are often left completely out of the agenda. And I'm speaking about the young persons with disability. And as I talk about young persons with disability, I'm wondering why in Nigeria in 2007, 2017, apologies for taking us 10 years back, we do not have a disabilities bill, right? I'm curious to know, how many young persons with disability participate in these kinds of leadership programs that you've talked about that happens in the air, on the land, on the sea? How are we ensuring that these people have the basic infrastructure needs that they need to be able to become active part of the Nigerian citizen, community to function? Because if we're not providing for this group of people, this very important group of people, have more than 20 million Nigerians who have a disability. If we're not providing for their needs, then we're creating a group of people who are frustrated, who are angry with the system, and we're breeding more and more challenges. So as you spoke about that, I thought about persons with disability and the disability bill.
All right, food for thought. Thank you very much. That's the much, of course, that we can take this discussion segment. We'd like to appreciate all our guests. We had earlier signed off Dr. Robert Asogwa of UNDP. We also like to express our appreciation to Ambassador John Iwara. He's Director of Training and Development, Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. Ambassador Iwara, thank you for being with us on the program today. Also, our appreciation also to Bella Anundubuisi, Director of Shape Up Mentoring, here with Abuja Global Shapers. Thanks a lot for your insights. As always, appreciation to Sam Itodo, Executive Director of YAGA. Thanks a lot always for your insights. And from our Lagos Network Studios, we're joined by Bingbe Bangboshe Martins, who is President, Strategy for Mentoring Initiative and Leadership Empowerment, which comes as SMILE by way of acronym. Bangboshe Martins, give us a smile this morning. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So that does it now for our discussion segment. Kirian, let's take one of our other segments.
Foreign news, yes, as we round off this edition. Now, Kevin Olushola became the first Nigerian to win a Grammy in the group category during the 57th Annual Grammy Awards premiere ceremony on arts and entertainment. Ngufan Shaji tells us more about this, but it does seem that this report is not ready to come, so let's take you to the foreign scene now.
Welcome, and here are some of the stories trending on the foreign segment.
Tropical Storm Harvey has been downgraded to a depression as it moved eastwards to Louisiana, but it still brought with it heavy rain and strong winds. Reports say the weather has weakened in Texas. The catastrophic flooding has left at least 30 people dead, and there are fears of finding more bodies when the water recedes. And in India, at least 7 people died and dozens fared trapped when a building collapsed in India's financial capital of Mumbai after days of heavy rain swamped the city. Rescuers using diggers could be seen sifting through the remains of 4-story residential building in the densely populated area of Bendi Bazaar.
Bye for now. More stories will come your way as they continue to unfold.
And now let's get back to entertainment.
Born October 5, 1988, Kevin Olushola is a Nigerian-American musician